Incimvabul is back, baby! The blue suit era is officially over, and we're back in the classic yellow costume, for reasons that are slightly unclear. But hey, that's what he did in the comic, so. This season has some pretty earth-shatteringly insane stuff coming up that I promise you I will not spoil. I wouldn't do that to you. You're my little guy. So before that happens, I wanted to go over what we've seen so far with the first half of Season 4. So far this season has some really good stuff, some new stuff not from the comics, and some pretty significant omissions as well, including probably the biggest shock in the entire series run for me, which was left out of the show completely. I still remember the jolt I felt turning that comic book page, and now that we're officially out of the blue suit era, I think it's safe to say that we're not getting that at all. I feel like the comic readers know what I'm talking about, but we'll get to that in a bit. So yeah, I've read the entire comic series run. As I said, I will not be spoiling what is coming up in Season 4 and the following seasons in any way. I love the comics, I love the show so far, I wouldn't want to ruin the story for anyone who hasn't experienced it yet. You're in good hands. So where's Mark at? Well, coming fresh off his fight with Conquest, Mark has made the decision that he will not hesitate to kill if it means protecting his family. And Season 4 so far has him essentially doubling down on that. And this is what's so interesting about Invincible's story as a whole. It's that idea of not being stuck in any kind of status quo. The characters in the world are constantly evolving, adapting to their environment, whether that's good or bad, and taking on more and more responsibilities as time goes on. And that's what's so interesting about when people say, oh, the blue suit era is Mark at his darkest, when that's not exactly the case. People think it's a one-to-one with Spider-Man's black suit era, where after he gets his old costume back, he's magically healed of all negativity and wrongdoing. Not so much. We haven't really seen Mark go back on his decision to kill at all. This is something he's still grappling with, and now with the giant wrench that Allen and Nolan are about to throw at him, roping him into their war, it's about to get a lot more complicated. Though I will say the blue suit definitely marks some particularly dark stuff in Mark's story, some of which the show has chosen to leave out. While it could be argued that it takes the claws out of the comic story a bit, I think for the most part people agree this specific omission is probably for the best. For context, the comic run was written at a different time, over 20 years ago. Kirkman was a little younger, a little edgier, calling people gay was all the rage. I think the Invincible comic run had some moments that were a little early 2000s edgy for the sake of edgy. Some very bold choices that something like The Walking Dead would become known for, but in this more optimistic, less bleak superhero story could come across as just mean, cruel to the characters for no reason. Alright, I've danced around it enough. As I'm sure most of you know, Amber in the show is a very, very different character, basically rewritten from the ground up. While Amber in the comic is kind of just a one-note love interest for Mark, who eventually drifts away from him as they enter college, Amber in the show was a fully fleshed out character with much more agency, intent, and stronger opinions on what Mark is doing. Mark and Amber breaking up in the show feels like much more of a sacrifice, since it's a result of Mark living in this crazy superhero world that Amber couldn't possibly keep up with. So Amber sort of naturally leaves the show, making room for Eve, and as most things do in this story, she pops back in from time to time as the story progresses. You know, every now and then we would get kind of a check-in with her. And in the book, well, things aren't going great for her. We check in on Amber during Mark's blue suit era, her calling him in a moment of desperation and not really giving Mark many details about what's going on. He flies over, her back is turned, she reveals her face to him, and yeah, her new boyfriend did that. So Mark, furious, rightfully so, flies over and decides to hold Amber's new boyfriend over a building. And this is a little bit before he decides that killing is not completely off the table, but it makes you wonder if he ran into this guy a little bit later, what he might do. Yeah, blue suit Mark! I mean, it's interesting in a lot of ways, because for the first time, you're kind of seeing a lot more of that VILTRUMITE blood come out in Mark. He's using his power over somebody he knows is powerless, really without any hesitation. And while he doesn't straight up murder the guy, which I don't think anybody would have a problem with if he did, it's him using his abilities over somebody that's essentially defenseless against him. It's a crazy tonal whiplash that on a first read got me pretty good. It just shows Kirkman's mastery of the comic medium and using the power of the comic page turn to its fullest effect. There's a similar moment in the Walking Dead comic series when Carl's eye gets shot out in Alexandria, still one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. So you could probably see why they omitted this part of the story. And while the story is no stranger to upsetting subject matter, especially, you know, going forward for those who know, the initial Invincible comic run isn't exactly known for its great treatment of female characters. I feel like some of the best characters we got in the show are completely written from the ground up. Debbie has a lot more agency. Amber, whether you like her or not, was a lot more of a character in the show. Some characters are even gender swapped just to kind of give some more female representation in there, which I don't think anybody has a problem with. Shout out to all my male shrinking Ray fans out there. And that kind of ties into this whole conversation I've seen about the structure of these seasons. I think a lot of people are finding kind of an issue with the rhythm of how some of these seasons are laid out. I think the show has a bit of a problematic pattern that's starting to form, which I think is leading to a bit of a pacing issue that a lot of people are experiencing right now. The comic, I mean, especially from Blue Suit Mark onward, is just like a consistent barrage of what feels like event after event. You get Invincible War, Conquest right after that, then the VILTRUMITE War. It's like every single issue at the last page there's some insane reveal that keeps you reading. Each season feels a little bit lopsided in nature. I kind of mentioned this in my season 3 video right before the Conquest fight, but it really feels like the first half of a lot of these seasons are kind of like checking in on Mark and the rest of the characters, the quote-unquote fun and games episodes. Problem is, I don't know if the show has the budget for fun and games. It really seems like a lot of the priorities, animation-wise and budget-wise, come in like the last 2 or 3 episodes of each season. And you'd think as the show goes on, they'd get a little bit more budget, a little bit more flexibility when it comes to just animating some of these flying around scenes or these non-essential fights to the story, you know, just for fun. It's a superhero show. I want to see Mark punch somebody. But it feels like kind of the opposite, where you look at season 1, the animation wasn't great, but the boarding was clear, you know, there were interesting ideas with each new fight. I feel like in the most recent season, some of these fights are kind of by the numbers, you know? I mean, in this most recent episode in Hell, it was a cool setting and background, but as far as the actual fighting goes, what, Mark punched a bunch of lava monsters? All right, I mean, I feel like we've seen that before. You know, like what's the point of showing us a giant Cerberus that Mark has to fight only to not show us the fight? That's lame. Look, the comic had to deal with its fair share of blemishes too. Some stuff really hasn't aged well. But I do think that a lot of the frustrations that fans have with the show's budget are valid. You know, it's not always just the animation, it's also random recasting. Like this new William voice took me out of this scene completely. And it's a shame because it goes to show us, hey, this character doesn't really matter anymore. We won't be seeing too much of him going forward, so, you know, just don't worry about him. That's kind of sad. And while we're on the subject of voices, what the fuck was this?
You will soon be sent to the far edges of our empire.
As you ways of great. Like, no, come on. Get back in the booth. We're doing another take. And another thing I wanted to talk about is some people are saying that this most recent episode in Hell, you know, the one titled Herm, was weird, and some people are even speculating that it gave kind of like backdoor pilot vibes, which, I don't know, feels kind of cynical and scummy for the show to do. I really hope that's not the case. But yeah, even when I was watching the episode, I'm like, we're spending a lot of time with these characters that I don't care about. And I know that Kirkman said that this was a storyline he always wanted to add into the comics and just never really found a good spot for. It doesn't really engage with Mark's whole morality about killing people right now too much. And so it's just kind of an excuse to bring back a admittedly cool character from season 1 and put Mark in a cool setting. But at the end of the day, what did this episode do for the overall story? Added even more fake out deaths than in the original series? Also, real quick, Damien saying Herm is a thing from the comics, and I always read that as like a contemplative sound, you know, like when Rorschach or Batman or some detective character would say it. I was just kind of picturing something like a you know, like a kind of lost in thought kind of a sound. But in the show, he literally just says the gibberish word Herm out loud. Did anyone else have that thought? Just me? Okay. I mean, the episode was a cool setting. I liked the vibe of Invincible goes to hell. And we also got some interesting lore for the Invincible world. Damien speaks about these ages and provides kind of a thin explanation for some of these giant monsters that show up throughout the story, which, I don't know about you, I didn't really need. In this world full of random-ass, powered-up heroes, giant monsters and things are kind of a given. Look, I'm hard on this show because I love this show. I do think, however, that it's falling into a pattern with the tempo of each season that runs the risk of getting stale and turning people off. And for all the things the comic was, it was never predictable. I'm glad the show is being released on a consistent yearly basis now, but I think it's in need of a shakeup tempo-wise. So each season's first half doesn't feel like just kind of fucking around until consequential events of the second. And yeah, without spoilers, this season's finale will be very consequential. We are promised a war after all, and I am still really enjoying the show despite its problems. Seeing Mark's moral dilemmas and the general conversation around taking a life expand and challenged by each new enemy is really cool. You know, Universa shows up and has him questioning if he should stop someone just trying to save their planet. Dinosaurus has him questioning if short-term loss of life is worth saving the greater population in the long term. Russ Livingston and the Sequids obviously represent a big shift in Mark's morality, having him kill an innocent man just possessed by creatures with wills of their own, all in the name of protecting the world at large. And this demon chick who represents, how punching fire demons is cool. You see what I mean? It just feels like a bit of a departure for Mark's journey, so that when he switches back to the original suit at the end of the episode, it's kind of jarring instead of a natural progression away from that era in his life. Anyway, now we'll get to see Mark's morals on killing expanded into the context of war. He's killed before in the name of protecting his family. Will he be willing to kill in the name of protecting his planet? What conversations will come up when faced with killing people who are fighting to protect their people at the expense of conquering the universe? I mean, especially now that we've learned kind of everything there is to learn about the Viltrumite culture and how they all got wiped out by the Scourge virus, it kind of complicates things a little bit, you know what I mean? Even if Mark does choose to kill, will he even be able to hold his own against an army of Viltrumites when he was barely able to fend off just one? And then there's the big Freddie Mercury in the room, Thragg, who I'm not gonna say a goddamn thing about. I will say the voice is not exactly what I expected, kind of similar to my reaction to Conquest. I was like, oh, that's a little, But like Conquest, I am open to being kind of proven wrong there. Also in the trailer, we see Thragg holding this kind of weird skull as he's flying around in space. A lot of the imagery you see of Thragg, probably online, has him with this skull. I wonder what that's all about. All of these questions and more to be answered in the back half of Season 4. We'll see how things hold up, but knowing what happens in the comics, I'm very excited to see some of the cooler moments of the series adapted here. But what are you excited to see coming up in the Viltrumite War? If you've read the comics, what arc are you most excited to see adapted? Do you want to see more Dinosaurus, Universa, Damien Darkblood? Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents about where Invincible's at so far in Season 4. Check out my other stuff, and I'll see you next time.